Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I'm really excited for this video because today I'm going to talk about one of my favorite authors of India and also one of the most loved authors of our country, and that is Ruskin Bond. It was time I honored the author-reader relationship that I have, and I was very excited to talk about him and his books and also show my collection of his works and then recommend his books to everyone. If you just want to see the part about the recommendations and the collection of Ruskin Bond, then you can skip to leave the timestamp on the screen as well as in the description. But before recommending his works, I thought it would be a great idea to talk about him a little bit, to tell you why reading Ruskin Bond's books is such a wonderful experience and give you the context of how his writings have impacted me personally and what are some of the best things about his books and about his writing style. I have never regretted picking one of his books. He is one of those authors whose works I go into blindly and know that I would acquire something of value from his books. And so I definitely want to share a few things about him. Now, those who are not acquainted with Ruskin Bond or those who have not read his works, I would definitely want to give a brief introduction about him. Ruskin Bond is an Indian author who is originally British. He was born in India in the year 1934, and this makes him 87 years of age at the present. And at present he lives in Mussoorie with his extended family, with his adopted family. So he wrote his first novel called The Room on the Roof at the age of 17, and it was very well received. He has won a lot of significant awards till now. He won the Sahitya Academy for his book Our Trees Still Grow in Dehra in the year 1992. He again won the Padma Shri in the year 1999, and he won the Padma Bhushan in the year 2014. He has written hundreds and hundreds of short stories, novellas, articles, essays, and children's books. His works tend to be very warm and light-hearted, and he talks a lot about nature and about the hills because that's where he spent most of his life. It was in the year 2005 or 2006 when I came across a story in my English textbook. It was called The Eyes Have It. And it was a very simple story. It was about two blind people traveling in a train, and they were in the same compartment. It got along very well with each other. They were kind of having conversations, but they did not reveal to each other that they were blind, not knowing that the other one is also blind. It was such a simple story, but made a very good impact on me. I saw the name that was printed above the story, and it was written Ruskin Bond. So it was at that time I came to know his name, and from that time onwards I began an association with him and his works, and till now I have read so many of his works and have really loved them, and they are very close to my heart. Now, I have mentioned in the introduction that he writes a lot of short stories and semi-autobiographical short stories, essays, poems, articles. His works tend to be more on the shorter side of length. He writes novels, but those are novellas, they're very short novels. Now here I would like to mention one thing, that even though I love almost everything that he writes, I tend to be more attached to his semi-autobiographical works, because what I think personally is that his writing style, the essence of his writing style, is best reflected in those type of writings. One thing I love best about him is how he's a subjective writer. He writes a lot of stories based on his environment or his own situation or even his mundane life. He can build a story out of an ordinary situation and make it seem interesting. He also uses his diary entries to create stories or essays, and they're very engaging and they're very humorous. There are so many times when I laugh a lot. There would at least be a smile on my face while I'm reading his work. He has himself said that he is a subjective writer. Give him an ordinary day, give him an ordinary circumstance, and he will write a story about it. That's one of his best abilities, and I do think that those stories that reflect on his own life, his own environment around him, they are some of the best. It's one thing to just write in a simple manner, but it's a wholly different matter to write both simply and beautifully. His writing is not repetitive, and this again he has mentioned somewhere. He has said that his writing process in his stories or in his any kind of work, no two sentences are the same. And one of the best things that I love about his work is that despite his hard life situation, and I'll talk about this in a bit, so despite his hard life situation, he has managed to find so much beauty and joy in those little things, in those little aspects of life. And then he has articulated those things in his writing, has conveyed them to the reader so that he or she too can feel those simple joys. And to talk about his life situation, what happened is that he lost his father at the age of 10. He was not too attached to his mother. Both his father and mother, they separated a few years before his father's death, and he went on to live with his father, and his mother married a different man. After the separation, he did not have any contact with his mother for almost 3 years, and he did spend a lot of significant and beautiful time in his father's company. His father really took such care of him, but it's very unfortunate that those were very short-lived moments. When he was at the boarding school at the age of 10, he lost his father. It was so heartbreaking to read those parts in his autobiography. I cannot say about these things more. I think you have to read the words of the writer himself, who has said how hard it was. After his father died, he did go to live with his mother, but it was never the same, because the kind of relationship that he had with his father, he did not have it with his mother. It was a very formal type of relationship. Since a very young age, he was kind of lonely, he found his love in stories, and then one day decided that he too himself should tell stories to other people throughout his life. Even during the journey of becoming a writer, it was not very easy at first. There were very less books published in India. There were a few newspapers that printed stories. They used to pay a very little amount to the writers whose story was published in those newspapers. And Ruskin Bond, initially, he started in that way by submitting his stories to those newspapers. His earnings were not much in the beginning, but I'm so glad that he made it. Like, his determination to spend all his life writing and then making a career out of it, it did really had an outcome. He did become a writer, and he did become someone who so many people adore now. So many people know him now. Despite the struggles, he did not give up, and he also mentioned this in his autobiography, how he used to sit in his typewriter throughout and write stories. And there's more to his struggling life, which I won't go into details. It's all there in his autobiography. Some people might say that his stories are very rosy, that they are too cheerful, but the main purpose of his writing is to convey that rosy essence or those simple joys that's even found in the most toughest of situations. The reason why I would come back to a Ruskin Bond book is to derive that feeling, is to derive those little joys. He had his own struggles, but despite that, he himself tried to find joys in nature, in the hills, in his company, in the people around him, and then convey those snippets of joy to his readers. As readers, we want to derive different things from different books or different things from different authors. Now, I read serious books with serious themes and love them, but that's not something that I'd want in a Ruskin Bond book. But here I'd like to mention that he does write certain serious stuff also. He does refer to certain serious stuff in a very simplistic manner as well. I remember the story he wrote about a very old peanut vendor. It was a true story, of course, and he wrote about how he used to sit in a fixed place and everyone used to take him and his peanuts for granted, but nobody ever bothered to ask his name or know things about him. Even after his death, no one really knew him for who he was. They just knew him as the peanut vendor. There are snippets of wisdom present in his simplistic stories as well. And on top of everything, he has managed to capture the atmosphere of the hills of India and the beautiful nature that's prevailing in our country. And he has captured not just the emotions of human beings or of the people around him, but he has that ability to capture the emotions or activities of non-human beings or of animals and insects as well. And I'd give one such example amidst my recommendations. So coming to my collections and recommendations, the first book that I would love to show is one of his first books that I owned, and it was this book. This is a 2-in-1 book. On one side we have Roads to Mussoorie, and on the other side we have All Roads Lead to Ganga. I do not know if this particular edition is available now to buy, but these books are available separately. I remember Roads to Mussoorie being very humorous. It was obviously semi-autobiographical, something which I definitely loved the most about him. And it is based on his life in Mussoorie and about the people he has met and about the events that have happened. I would highly recommend this book. All Roads Lead to Ganga. This is not too humorous, but then again it's beautifully written. It's very descriptive. It's a travel memoir. In this book he talks a lot about the mountains, the rivers, the streams, the valleys that's there in our country. He has traveled a lot in those hilly regions or those mountainous places and those pilgrimage sites like Badrinath, Kedarnath, etc. And if you love travel memoirs, then definitely I would recommend this book. This book has a lot of descriptions about nature, but if you just want something light-hearted and something just very warm and humorous, I would recommend Roads to Mussoorie. But both of them are worth a read. Another book that I have with me is this. This I actually bought in one of the book fairs, and this is also a very funny, humorous book. It is semi-autobiographical also. It has reference to many of his real-life relatives put together in a story, and yeah, it has a lot of eccentric characters as well. There are so many stories about his uncle called Ken. He had an uncle called Uncle Ken, and he was kind of a very different fellow. He was kind of different from the rest of his brothers and sisters. It was kind of eccentric, and this character has appeared in a lot of stories by Ruskin Bond. There are a lot of collections of stories such as this one. A lot of times it happens that some of his stories made into numerous collections. So one story, we might find one story in 2 or 3 collections. And so this is one of his collection of his short stories, a very random collection of his short stories. Some of his collections are very popular and unique as well, such as this one, Rain in the Mountains. This is one of my personal favorite collections. He has spent a considerable time in the foothills of the Himalayas, and this book reflects those moments. In this book there are essays or semi-autobiographical short stories or short stories in general, journal extracts, and then articles, poems, a drama also, which were kind of in reserve with him for so many years, as he said in his foreword, and then he decided to publish them in the form of this book. This book is divided into 5 sections, and the first section has his write-ups written in the 70s. The second section is his essays written in the 60s, 70s and 80s. The third section is journal extracts. The fourth section is his write-ups written in the 90s, and the fifth one is the epilogue. And it's a beautiful collection of stories. The next collection is also a very useful collection, especially for someone who is new to reading Ruskin Bond's works. Frankly speaking, you can start with any of his works, but still this book, that is the best of Ruskin Bond, it catalogs some of his best works into just one book. So this also has essays, semi-autobiographical stories or random stories, and a few extracts from his novellas also as well. This is again divided into sections. So we have, the first section is, we have short stories about love and friendship, then we have some other random short stories, then we have essays and collections, then we have his travel writings, and then his songs and love poems, and then we have the novel extracts. And yeah, very useful collection. And the favorite part of this book are the essays, obviously. I have already mentioned his time and again, I love his essays, his semi-autobiographical works. And his random short stories are also very good in this collection. They are very simple and written beautifully. But if I have to name a specific short story collection, not his essays or all those semi-autobiographical works, but some specific short stories, then I would definitely recommend one of my favorite personal collections. I do not have the physical book with me, I just have the ebook in my Kindle, and I really hope to buy the physical book for this one because I love the short stories in this one, and that's Time Stops at Shamli. The short stories in this one are very, very simple and unique, and I love them. And yeah, if I just have to recommend his short stories, I would recommend this collection first. But there's another short story collection of his. This one also I do not have the physical copy with me right now, and it's called Collected Short Stories of Ruskin Bond, which this has about 70 of his short stories he has ever written. And this is also a very useful collection. Another of his book that I absolutely love is this one, Landour Days. So this is actually a collection of his journal entries or diary extracts. Some of the entries are long and descriptive, some are short, some are just his musings or his reflection on a particular thing or something that happened that day. And as I have mentioned, he can write even the most mundane things and he would make it interesting. This book again is divided into sections. Those entries are kind of categorized into 4 sections. We have summer, we have monsoon, autumn, and winter. Again, within those sections, we have the months, that is January, February, March, and he has kind of cataloged his writings month-wise and made it into this book. So in Landour Days, he reflects on his writing life, obviously the places he has lived, his surroundings. Another collection that I have of him is Uncle, Aunts, and Elephants, but sadly, I cannot find a book right now. It had some significant stories. This is again a collection of his fiction as well as non-fiction write-ups. As the title indicates, this book revolves a lot around his relatives and animals in general. And it's quite funny. There are so many stories that revolve around animals. For example, there's a story of this monkey called Tutu. He is such a notorious monkey, the havoc that he creates in the lives of the people around him. I really love his humorous stories, and here also I loved those humorous parts, but one story in particular really stood out. Contrary to his humorous writing style, that story was not humorous, but I thought it was such an important story and so well written. The story was titled Good Day to You, Uncle, and it was about this tiger. He resides in a forest near a village, and he's the only tiger in that forest, and the way he captured the tiger's emotions or his behavior. I think I have already mentioned this, that he, apart from human characters, he writes these non-human characters or animal characters also so well. And this was reflected in this story. I mean, tigers are scary animals. I'm afraid of them, but I cannot help empathizing with this tiger. It also has a very important message. The condition of wildlife in our country it has a lot of issues, and those things are reflected in the story as well. It's a beautiful story. I would highly recommend this story. I would recommend this whole book, but I would definitely recommend this story. This story might have also appeared in some other collection. Another book that I have of him, which I don't know where I bought it, but yeah, this is this. It is kind of an illustrated memoir. This part actually I've already read in his autobiography, but again, I think those certain parts of the autobiography are made into these illustrated memoirs. And this is actually part of a series. There are 3 other books in this one. It speaks of a particular year in his life, that is the year of independence, 1947, how his life changed. He was still in his boarding school, and a lot of changes was taking place over there as well. It's there with a lot of illustrations. You can check out these illustrated memoirs, or you can directly read his autobiography, which again brings me to one of my most treasured autobiographies or memoirs, and it's Lone Fox Dancing, his autobiography. Such an honest account of his life. Here he has kind of written things in detail. Even those stories which are kind of semi-autobiographical, we do see a true picture, but it's only one part of the true picture. And here he has kind of also given us kind of a behind the scenes of those stories as well. Really don't have words to describe this book, because obviously It's an autobiography, that too one of my favorite authors' autobiography. And how do I describe someone's life? It is a very honest account of his life from the childhood till the present, and we get to know so many things. And from here itself we get to know how hard his life had been, struggles that he had to face, and his life was not at all rosy. He still made through those hard moments through his humor and his storytelling. This book has kind of elevated my respect for him. There are obviously humorous moments in this one as well. There are parts that make me laugh, but there are also parts that kind of make me sad. They are not written in a very overtly sad manner, but obviously you can feel those emotions. And this one I would specifically recommend to Ruskin Bond fans. I mean, yeah, other people who are new to Ruskin Bond can also understand this book. This is very simple. He has written it in his characteristic, simplistic style of writing. But I mean, someone who has a prior connection to his stories, or prior connection to his emotions, or his reflection, or or the author in general, they would be able to connect to this more. Directly reading the autobiography of someone you don't know is less fruitful than reading the autobiography of someone you already know. Another book that I have of him is actually a novel. It's called Rusty and the Leopard. This actually features one of his memorable fictional characters called Rusty, which is very much influenced by his own life. After writing The Room on the Roof, he also went on to write some other novels where this character, Rusty's character, was featured, and this is one of the novels. There are other novels like Rusty Runs Away or Rusty Goes to London. You can check those as well. And this one, I like the book, but I definitely like his short stories more. And yeah, but it's still good. It's very simple. If you love Rusty's character, especially if you have read The Room on the Roof, you would know about Rusty's character, and you can check out the other novels that has featured this character. So those were my collections, and I hope to collect more of his book. There are a few other recommendations. I would recommend his Our Trees Still Grow in Dehra, that book. It's also a very beautiful book. I haven't read that one, but I'm hoping to. It also has a collection of his short stories or his essays in general, I guess. And if you like his short stories, there are other collections like The Night Train at Deoli and other stories. There are a lot of novellas as well. You can check those out. You can check out The Blue Umbrella, which is a very short book. And he has written numerous other stories or books as well. There's so many of them. You can definitely check them out in Amazon. And if you're someone who hasn't got into his works, then please do, because I do think that they would impact you in a good way. And yeah, I hope you liked this video. I hope you liked my collection, and I hope you check out some of his books if you haven't. I'll see you next time. Have a pleasant evening, have a good night, and if you enjoy watching book related videos or videos such as this one, then do subscribe to my channel, and I hope to come soon next time with another video. Goodbye.